Okie dokie, welcome back. This is our third session. Welcome back if you have seen the first two. But welcome if you're just joining for this one, which is a bit of a look at some fundamental mixing tips and tricks and everything in between. Very excited to show you some different projects that I've worked on professionally and kind of take you through some of the fundamental things that I think, most people should know before they start, mixing things together. The key point, which I will iterate again and again and again, is does it sound good to your ears? And if it does sound good, could it be better? And if the answer is yes, go for it. If the answer is no and you're happy with it, that is fine. That is good. You have done it. Well done. But as you develop your ear and skills around mixing and everything in between, like I say, you will become more critical, and sometimes it will get to a point where you need to make a decision and just commit, and that's also fine. What I'm going to show you to start with is a project that I made in response to I went to see Dune, which is the big sci-fi epic that came out earlier this year, and was very inspired by the soundtrack by Hans Zimmer and the team, as it were, and I thought I'd have a little bash at making my own version. And I remember making this when I was kind of locked up at home with COVID, and I didn't have any instruments really with me. I had my microphone and a few percussion bits, as in like a tiny snare drum, which I'll show you in a moment, and just had a go. And I used lots of MIDI instruments, lots of samples, and lots of other recorded things, and kind of came up with this. So I'm going to play you a little bit at the beginning, and then some of the when it kicks off a little bit. I mean, I'm pretty pleased with it, and hopefully it will play for us, because there's a lot of things recording on my laptop right now, so hopefully it will get through. We'll have a go. Pause it there because we're having. I'm going to pause it there. Hopefully that's still recording. Okay, I think it is. We had a little bit of difficulty there because there was a few too many channels all playing at the same time, and like I say, I'm recording a lot of things on the laptop with video and audio, so it wasn't surviving towards the end there. But you get the picture, you get the idea. It's quite an epic theme, isn't it? And I just wanted to play you a few different bits in isolation, actually, just show you what's going on. So I've got at the very beginning this choir sound, and this choir sound is actually a labs sound. I don't think I can. No. So I've frozen it to kind of save CPU, which is something you might have to do if you have as many tracks as this, and you're trying to show somebody. But which basically means, it bounces the audio, which is to mean that it kind of prints the audio, which is to mean that it kind of saves what the sound of the audio would be, so it doesn't have to process it in real time. Anywho, it's just a choir sound. If I solo that, you can hear that there. It's all quite nice. That's what's happening at the beginning there. And I have lots of different kind of sounds happening alongside that at different points. So, I mean, here you go. This is Rising Synth something. What's that sound like? Let's have a listen. Lots of different sounds going on there, playing different things. I'll quickly show you the tiny snare drum I had as well, because this was quite funny. I remember doing this. So imagine me sat in my bedroom, not feeling very well, and then playing this little snare drum. And it honestly, it's like yay big. But I played it. And then I played it a couple more times. Well, actually, I think I only played it once. But then I changed the pitch on some of these and played it all together. Sounds a bit more big. And in context, when I've got that going, alongside all the other stuff, with the toms and stuff, quite big tom sounds. So, alongside all that, we've got these big strings. I mentioned in the previous video the BBC Symphony Orchestra, BBC Philharmonic Symphony. I think I said Phil in the last video, but Symphony Orchestra. You can hear just a little flute playing there. It's playing. I've also got some trombones playing there, and some French horns as well. And in true Hans Zimmer fashion, I've also got a tuba playing. Which altogether sounds quite funny, if I'm being honest, given the kind of atmosphere of the rest of the track. But in context with everything, it's all about the blend and getting layers in and all that kind of thing. Honestly, that is the thing that sells all these tracks. But let's dive into some EQing then. So there was a lot to do with this track, lots of different individual things, EQs and things to kind of make it all sound nice, basically. If we take, for example, this lead snare sound, which in isolation does sound a bit bad, I will admit, but let's have a listen anyway. So I didn't do anything to the individual tracks, but I grouped them together and then I did EQ them a little bit. What I'm going to do to just demonstrate some of this is hop back to our project that we were working on, so Ground Up. I'm not going to save that. And we're going to go through 5 really key mixing techniques and hopefully turn our 3 tracks into something that sounds really, really cool. So let's take, if we hop back actually to our piano sound that we recorded with the microphone first. So we've got that recording. Now, if we select the track, you'll see down here it says drop audio effects here. Now, what are they? If we go over to this section over here and we can click on plugins, if we've got our own plugins, or we can click on audio effects. There you go. And I probably have a longer list than you do at this point, but that's okay, because you will definitely have EQ8. I want you to drag that down onto audio effects there. What you will be able to see here, which is pretty useful, is our EQ. And you can see that here. If I do this, it will just transport it up here and make it a little bit easier for us to see. So I'm going to set this loop playing, and whoa, you can see the waveform acting in real time. Now, what are we looking at? Well, from left to right, we are looking at the spectrum of sound. So at the very left, we have the lowest sounds. On the very right, we have the highest sounds of our piano recording. The human hearing range is between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz, if you didn't know. And as you get older, the top end of your hearing particularly gets degraded. And, it's usually around the 18, 19 kilohertz range for most adults. And it does drop down from there even further. And so there is an argument about whether or not you need any of that sound up there, because can you even hear it? And I would argue, yes, you can. And when we come to the hi-hats in a minute, we may see some sound that exists in the 10 kilohertz and above range. But for now, let's just have a listen to the piano again and see where our sound is on the spectrum. Bearing in mind that our 20 hertz and below is our cutoff point, let's just check that if we're seeing anything around here, which is our 20 hertz region, from this line onwards. So I can see that there's definitely some 20 hertz action there, which we definitely don't need. There is no way that anybody is going to hear that. So I would say, if we're in the grand scheme of things, do we need this piano part to actually have any bass, really low bass sound? And I would say no. And because of that, I'm going to change our EQ shape to this one here, which is like a low shelf, I guess, a high pass, and move it across. And now let's just hear the effect of that on the audio. If I take it a bit too far, you'll hear that just the top end is coming out now. And if I bring it back across, you can hear that lower end stuff coming out. You'll notice there's not a lot of differences there between this and this. If you're asking them why bother, well, that's a very valid question. But the reason you would be bothered and maybe should take some time to do this to all of your tracks is all of this stuff in the bottom here is like stuff where if there's a bit of wind, or if somebody nudges a microphone stand by accident, or if someone stamps on the floor by accident. Do you know what I mean? It's all of these little things that exist in this little frequency range. So you can get rid of it, bin it off. You don't need it. And, at worst, if you have, 10, 20 tracks and they all have this low, muddy stuff going on, it will add up and it will sound messy. And, at best, it's a really easy thing to clean up, and it will make everything sound a bit clearer and easier to hear, which is what we want. We want something that's kind of sounds good, and, with good intentions, I guess. So that's the first EQing thing that I would recommend you do is if it doesn't need the bass, let's get rid of some of that bass sound. Now, this to me still sounds a little bit cloudy. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this number 3 one. We're just going to boost. We're going to boost the level of the sound in this region here. And we're just going to see what sounds good. Have a little experiment. So here, you can hear here is like quite clustered. This is where most of the sound is focused already. So it sounds a bit kind of overwhelming when it's here. But up here it sounds a little bit nicer. So I think over there sounds pretty good. So I'd just like to draw your attention to what these controls down here mean. And, with any EQ, they all look slightly different, but they all have the same parameters, and they all kind of do the same thing. But what we're looking at here is we're looking at the frequency that we're boosting, or affecting rather, I should say. So 3.43 kilohertz. We've got the gain, which is to do with how much we are affecting that sound. We're adding 9.35 decibels of sound to that frequency range. And the Q is how sharp or steep the curve is. If we up the Q number, you'll see it gets sharper and sharper and sharper and sharper. If it's too sharp, then we're kind of really only affecting kind of a few hertz. We get like a whistle. We might end up with a whistly sound. It's quite subtle, but if I turn this up the Q, and put it over one of these spikes, you can hear it like, there you go, you can kind of hear that it's just affecting that one note, da, da. You get that pure note, so we don't want that. So instead of that, let's move that back to 3.43, wasn't it? And the cool thing about Ableton is you can just type in anywhere. Oops. Do that. Oh, for some reason that's not working. 3.43, anywho. There we go, we're around there somewhere. Let's have a listen to that. And we can change the Q to something a bit more gradual. And I think we can have like a whole top end boost here. And that cluttered section in this middle here, I think we could maybe do a dropping it down a little bit. And I'm hearing now, duh, duh, that note that we boosted. I don't know if it's like a psychosomatic thing, but I'm going to actually try and remove that now. So we've got our fifth module here, and I'm just going to up the Q and search it out. I'm going to turn it up, and I'm going to see if I can find do. So it's there, isn't it? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it down. It's a little bit more subtle now, but that sounds, to my ears, a lot better. Let's hear how it sounded before. This is how it sounds now. It's a lot. It is less rich overall, which I don't know if I like that much, but I do like how it sounds a little bit less muddy. I think that microphone choice maybe wasn't the best microphone choice. We recorded this on a ribbon microphone if you went with us for the first session. And I do think it's quite a colourful microphone, and I actually think we might have been better off using a couple of overheads in a stereo pair. But that's we're living and learning. Let's see what that sounds like with our MIDI instrument. I have a feeling this piano might be slightly out of tune, so let's just check it actually does work. Oh, so there you go. Immediately, it's unusable. So it's not. I don't think we've changed the pitch of this. No. Do. Do. E. That's definitely. Is that definitely an E? I think it is. That's interesting. So that seems to work. It's like a semitone higher. Oh, goodness me. How has that happened? I thought that piano was a bit more in tune than that. Wow, no way. Well, anywho, we can join that together. And what we could potentially try is changing this to complex. And then just dropping it down to wow, that's pretty cool. Okay, seriously, like kind of phasey sound. So if we just solo, what I'm doing, by the way, is pressing Shift and Tab, and we can jump between this view where I'm affecting this region and changing the pitch here, semitone, and the exact tuning there on complex mode, important, for this section here. And I'm pressing Shift and Tab again to jump back into our arrangement view. So I'm just going to solo by pressing S for solo, and then pressing Command or Apple and solo again on the piano. And just solo those two tracks, and let's just hear them together. So we've accidentally happened upon something which sounds pretty cool to me. What happens if we loop this section here? What happens if it carries? Oh, I don't like that. And I have a feeling I think I've figured out why this has gone so strange. No, I haven't figured it out. But we'll go -1, -38 once again. Just to kind of change this. -1, -38. So this needs to be a little bit more in tune, this bit, I would say. Anywho, this is a little bit more advanced than our than we're meant to be. It's actually good. I'm just going to sort this once, just so we can use this section later. Okay, that's good enough. turn it down a little bit, just to vary it a little bit. It's nice and subtle. Yeah, that sounds cool. Okay, sorry about that. But you can see now that we've got this EQ going. Now, we could maybe do the same thing to our EQ for the upright piano and just check we're happy with this. So again, we could maybe get rid of some of this bottom end, which we don't need. And that's pretty good to me. I'm quite pleased with that. And give it that kind of slight lo-fi edge by brightening it up a little bit. What you might see in lo-fi as well, actually, if we're talking about this, is just like a filter. Something like that. So this is on auto filter now. What you'll have seen, I did that in a little bit of a flash, but I pressed Apple F or Command F, searched for filter, and then Ableton's really great at just spitting out everything that's got the word filter in, which for me is a lot of plugins and some samples as well. So then I can click the one I want. So this is a good way. When you know what you're looking for, you can quickly find it in Ableton, which is really useful as well. So it could be that we want to... But you can kind of give things some kind of direction there by changing the filter amount. We'll talk about automation hopefully in a little bit. We will hopefully have time. Anyway, let's get rid of that for now. We'll just turn that off. And here we are then. So we've EQ'd our piano. Now you would be best practice would be to go and EQ everything, because why not? No, not necessarily. EQ the things that are in the way of each other. That's honestly what I would suggest. You know, you want to make space for everything. So if something is really bassy and it's your bass line, that's probably quite important that it stays bassy. But you might want to kind of EQ a bit more top end into it so that you can hear it above the rest of everything else, because sometimes the attack of the bass can get lost. If you've got another thing, like a synth sound that has loads of bass in it, but maybe it's doing like a kind of vibe, depending on the context, obviously, but you might want to consider getting rid of some of the bass from that track so that the bass line can kind of come through. So it's about making space for everything to kind of sit together. And if you make a decision that two things should occupy the same space, make sure they work well together. So, you know, there's lots of kind of subtle things that we can do to help that. One of those things is panning. Now, panning is when we take sounds and we move them from left to right. So if we were to take our piano sound, for instance, solo that, and then I can move it from the left, all the way to the left and left, all the way to the right. We can do it like that. Now, we haven't got a lot of tracks here, and I'm going to make an executive decision for now that this is probably not going to be panned very far. I'm going to pan that to the left and that one to the right a little bit further because it's a bit quieter. What does that sound like? It sounds like almost nothing has changed, and that's okay. We're looking for percentage gains here. We're looking for kind of little changes that will make a big difference when they all add up at the end. You will hear, if there's lots of tracks happening in some of the projects I've worked on in the past, stuff has been panned all over the place, from extreme left to extreme right to and you can kind of push things forwards and backwards even using reverb, which we'll come on to in a minute. But this is all called panning. What we're going to do is we're going to look at our drum groove and see if we can do any extra panning here, because I think there's some opportunities here to do some panning. So if we take our groove, I think our bass drum should stay super central, but our hi-hats, I think, can kind of move around a little bit. So if we dive into controls, we can pan this all the way to the right. And I think for me, the hi-hat should just exist a little bit further to the right. I'm going to randomize the pan a little bit, so it's actually not always going to be that far. And I'm going to change this hi-hat that happens every now and then to the left. So you get, and it kind of goes over to the left. Yeah, you can hear how it goes. Yeah. That feels good to me. And just that little change will hopefully brighten up, and you'll be able to hear it in the group now. It's just those little changes. That feels pretty good to me. I like that a lot. Yeah, nice. So that's some panning that we can do. And like I say, with lots of different instruments, you want to pan those all over the place. One of the projects I worked with Naimaz on a while ago was creating a guide to make it during the darker pandemic times. Everybody was doing lots of recordings from home. You might have seen some of kind of these big mosaic collages of people performing kind of a piece, but everyone was recording at home. I was one of the people who assembled those videos. So I had kind of, in this instance, I think it was 80 or 90 videos of young musicians playing the Radetzky March, I think it was, in their living rooms and bedrooms, whatever, and sending those recordings to me to put together. And it was a massive exercise in kind of streamlining your workflow, because you had to import 90 different tracks, music tracks, make sure they were all lined up together, and then kind of pan them around as if it was a real orchestra. So you had to kind of make the listener feel as if they were listening to something that was in a concert hall. And a fair amount of auto-tune too. But it was a great project to be involved with, and it taught me a lot about making quick decisions, importing things quickly, and then creating the video, which was a whole other job as well. And my poor computer having to deal with all of that. Anywho, so EQ and panning was absolutely paramount then. And the other thing that was paramount at that point was compression. Now, we've been dealing with MIDI instruments, and often MIDI instruments will kind of not have as many issues as when we record people playing, when it comes to volume levels and having consistent volume levels. Now, you can see I've done okay here. This whole passage is pretty much the same volume. But what you might want to do let's quickly talk about what compression is, and then I'll tell you what you might want to do with it and think about it. Compression really is the idea that you take a sound, and what you want to do is make the quietest bits a bit louder, and without kind of making the louder bits too much louder, if that makes any sense at all. So to do that, you basically turn up the volume of everything, and then that triggers the compressor to work, which listens for any sound that is over a certain volume, and then it will automatically turn that down, and you can control how quickly it turns down the sound that is over a certain limit. And the effect of that is a squeezing sensation for the sound, where the quieter sounds are lifted up and the louder sounds kind of get squashed together a little bit. Compression can be done for kind of with artistic effect, and it can be done as a utility. And I guess with all of these things that we're talking about, they can all be done for those reasons. You can use EQ to rescue a track that sounds bad because it was in the wind or something, or because the microphones weren't in the best place for them, and you can kind of EQ and actually make it sound pretty good. So that would be an example of using EQ for utility. But you could also use EQ for creative choice. We've experimented with that a little bit with this upright piano sound, where if we wanted to, we could kind of drop, we could just have the low at the high end. And if we did that, we're now fundamentally altering the sound of the piano as it is. Pianos don't generally sound like that in real life. So that's now a creative use of EQ. So all of these things, it's a balance. There's always a balance of, are we EQing because we want it to sound, inverted commas, better, as in technically better, or do we want it to sound better in a kind of artistic way? And often they can be hand in hand, obviously. But compression can be used in both of those ways as well, as utility or as artistic tools. If we take our drum sounds, drums are quite easy to spot compression with, I would say. So let's add a compressor. So Apple F compressor, there we go. And you'll see down here in our chain of audio effects, we've got our drum rack that we created last time that takes up all that space, and then the compressor. So if we solo the drums, you will see the waveform appearing. There you go, that grey stuff. And on the right hand side is exactly when the sound is happening. Now, what do these controls mean? Well, we've got the ratio. This is like the ratio between the sound that goes over the threshold, which is our like, at what point does the compressor start acting? How much does it reduce the sound by? So if you have it infinite to 1, obviously that is going to be very, very aggressive compression, almost a type of limiting, which we'll come on to next in the next session. But we kind of want to, we don't want to go jumping right there, so we'll start with kind of a 3 to 1. I always think it's best to start with a kind of weaker ratio until you can kind of hear it, and then you can see. The attack is how quickly does the compressor act? Does it wait a millisecond and then turn it down? Or does it, in the same way that we were talking about attack, decay, sustain, and release with our synth sounds and synthesis, attack and release mean the same thing here. So attack is how quickly does it engage, and release is how slowly does it disengage. How long does it take for it recognizing a loud sound, affecting, squashing it back down, and then it releases, and how long does that take? If you have a compressor that is extremely strong and attack is very, very quick, then you will hear that. It's quite kind of it's an immediacy of loudness, it's quite, you can really hear it. We'll try a thing in a moment where we do sidechain compression, which I'll show you. But in short, compression is about kind of making things a little bit louder and clearer often. So let's just try it. Let's just experiment a little bit. We're going to turn the attack right down because drums happen pretty immediate. We remember, hit the sound, the attack is almost 0. So we need to be quite quick with the compression as well. And the threshold tells us when do we start compressing. So let's just bring it down slowly. So that orange line at the top shows us how much, how much are we compressing. And we can see the effect on the sound as well. So it's like hitting quite a lot. So you can hear every single bass drum is being slammed really hard with the compressor now. We turn up the ratio. The smaller sounds, though, the hi-hats, which are quieter, are not being effective, are they? And you can hear how they've gotten louder because of that. So without the compressor. And you can hear how the bass drums are now being squashed. Okay, so with that in mind, I would think, we don't need to do much with the compressor here. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to ignore it completely because Ableton has an even cooler thing called the drum bus. Now, if we type in drum bus, there it is. Load that in, and you can see right at the end here, there's our drum bus. And it's got a compressor built in here. Compressor, we can just turn it on and then trim it. And so that's quite useful. We've got a dry wet here, which you'll see on a lot of plugins and a lot of plugins, EQs, compression, reverb, delay. And dry wet basically means the dry signal or the wet signal. The dry signal is what you started with, and the wet signal is what has happened to the audio that's been affected by the plugin or the effect or whatever. So we can try 100% wet to start with, and then we might dial it back because we might crunch it a bit too far and then come back and then see how that feels. So you can already hear that it's so different, so much louder, more present. Okay, so we've got a few settings here. I won't go into these too much because I think it'd be fun for you to play with it. But what I'm going to try is just mess with the transients a little bit. Transients are the bits of the waveform that are the highest. They're kind of the note, the kind of stronger moments. With these chords, it would be the start of each chord. They're the bits of the waveform that poke out. like that. I think the bass drum is too strong. So I'm actually going to go into the drum rack, select our, remember to select here, drum rack, find our kick drum and just drop the volume a little bit. Yeah. Now that's quite loud, quite strong compared to what it was. I'm into the snap. That snap of the is much nicer. But what we can do is just turn that down in our project up here. Just turn that all. Oh, that's the wrong one. We can just turn it all down here. Keep the intensity and see how that feels now with everything. Now, what I would say is I think that rim click sound, this one. Oh no, this one. Nope. This one is a little. I don't know. It's a little bit weak. So what we're going to do is we're going to find our EQ again, EQ 8, and we're going to drag that into the drum rack. And now we can affect this, just this sound. So let's just solo the drum rack with this. And I think we can up that, the top end of that. And then drop off the low end like we did with the piano. Yeah. See how that sounds like in context now. Yeah, so I think this is going to sound much better now. A little bit less. Yeah. That to me feels a little bit nicer for sure. So that's good. That's there. That's in there. So this is looking nice and healthy now. We've got a nice drum bus on there. That's pretty good. So that's what compression does anyway. Just to summarize, it's a squeezing of the sound. We can do a thing called sidechain compression, which is where the sound of one thing triggers the compressor on another thing. You might see that quite a lot in electronic music or pop music even, and it's used as an artistic tool to create this kind of pumping sound where you get like, so that's kind of like the bass drum is going and the bass is going and getting louder after the bass drum, because the bass drum is causing a compressor that's on the bass to squeeze the bass sound and then release and get louder again. So that's what sidechain compression does. And if you want to learn how to do that, do some Googling, because it's really easy. We've not really got time for it right now, but it's definitely worth investigating, because it will be another dimension for you to explore and experiment with. Now, we've looked at EQ, panning, and compression so far. Let's have a little look at what on earth reverb is. Now, reverb is a serious tool. And I'm just going to load up one of my favorite reverb plugins, just because it's going to be really easy to explain what's going on using it. So, reverb is effectively the sound that you hear in the room. Like if you were to clap in a cave, for instance, you might hear a and like a really long, the reverberations of that sound in the space. And so reverb, when we're using it as a software tool, reverb in software form, we're really kind of looking to create different spaces for our sounds to exist in. Again, this can be a utility thing or an artistic thing. You will hear reverb on all of your favorite songs, I don't doubt. And often it will be because it's kind of like, oh, they're in a space and it makes them sound kind of nice and airy and that kind of thing. And sometimes it will be because without reverb, it's very dry. It's like what my voice is like on this video right now. It's very dry, which sometimes is also an artistic choice. There really are no rules. But if we take a version here, so let's load up Small Church. Here you go. here's a preset reverb, and what I'm going to do is we've loaded that onto one of our return effects channels here. So A, you can see that there. So I've clicked on A, and then I've selected reverb. You can select a reverb, a stock kind of Ableton reverb, and it will work just as well. And the mix is 100% because we're going to be sending sounds from our tracks into the return effects track, which is A. So let's just hear this. Let's solo our drums. Very dry, no reverb. And what we're going to do, this one here is our first send track, which is A. So that's getting sent to our reverb channel now. So let's give this a go. I'm going to press play and then slowly feed it in. Now, to me, that sounds bad. But it could be that that's what you want. That could be that that's what you want. Drum room, let's try this. Even that's too much. But a little bit. Makes those hi-hats sing a little bit more, don't you think? Maybe a little bit too much. We can try and dip off some of the lines. So I think those hi-hats are actually a bit too loud now. So we can just turn it down a bit. Yeah, it's a bit better. So you're always chopping and changing. The more familiar you are with the program, the more you can kind of dive around. But I'm happy with that as a sound. Now, let's quickly change this delay, which we'll come back to. Add another iteration. Iteration? I don't know what I'm trying to say. But another FabFilter Pro R plugin here. FabFilter are great, by the way, if you want to check out their plugins. They're really good. And let's go for a slightly different vibe. Let's go for a piano room. There you go. Look at this. They've got a preset here. And what we can do is we can change the space, the size of the reverb, how long it takes for the reverb to... how long each sound lasts. So if you were to play one note really quickly, does it last 1.66 seconds or 3 seconds? We can see how that changes. If we solo our piano track now, turn up B, which is our second return. Wow, look, there you go. So that's what that's going to sound like. But we can bring that down. We can change the mix. We don't need to do that here. There's some other things here, decay rate. All reverbs, again, give you some slightly different tweakable things. My suggestion would be to just experiment. The thing that is common with them all is this space or the time. Yeah, so the amount of time it takes for the sound. So let's hear what this sounds like. And without. Immediately feels like it's a bit more in a space, doesn't it? I don't know if you're feeling that, but to me that sounds a little bit warmer and richer. It makes the drums sound very dry now. So I wonder what happens if we put some drums in there as well. A bit too much. I don't mind a little bit though, that's quite nice. I'll try putting a bass in, but I think the bass would be a bit overwhelming. Should be pretty dry generally, but we'll see what it sounds like. Yeah. So you can see, if I turn off those, it's quite dry sounding, and then with them on, it already feels a little bit more alive to me. So there you go, that's what reverb does. Delay, very, very briefly, is a kind of... the way delay works, at least, is it takes the sound that you've played into it and plays it back to you at the speed you choose it to. And you can choose how much it feedbacks into itself, if that makes sense. So if I was to say, hello, 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 that would be delay. And you can do lots of very fun creative